The sea off the coast of Samar Island in the Philippines was deceptively calm in the early morning light of October 25, 1944. A low overcast hung in the sky, with occasional rain squalls drifting across the vast expanse of the Philippine Sea. For the men of the American task unit known as Taffy 3, the dawn had begun like any other in the sprawling campaign to liberate the Philippines. Aboard the 6 small escort carriers, the 3 destroyers, and the 4 destroyer escorts that made up this modest force, crews went about their duties with the practiced rhythm of a well-established routine. Some ships launched their morning anti-submarine patrols, others prepared aircraft for yet another day of providing close air support for the massive American invasion force, the 6th Army, now firmly established on the beaches of Leyte. These sailors and aviators were specialists in supporting troops on the ground, hunters of submarines, and providers of local air cover. They were not built for, nor did they expect, a fight with the main battle fleet of the Imperial Japanese Navy. They were, in the grand scheme of the Pacific War, a supporting cast. But history was about to place them squarely at center stage, in a confrontation that would defy all odds and become one of the most legendary last stands in the annals of naval warfare. This is the story of the Battle off Samar, the centermost and perhaps most dramatic action of the larger Battle of Leyte Gulf, a clash of titans that would see a handful of American sailors, pilots, and their small ships stare into the teeth of the most powerful surface fleet Japan had sent to sea since the days of Midway. The stage for this incredible drama was set by a complex and daring Japanese strategy, a plan known as Shogo 1, a final, desperate gambit to thwart the American reconquest of the Philippines. The Japanese High Command knew they could not win a straight-up fleet engagement against the overwhelming industrial might of the United States Navy. Instead, they devised an intricate plan of deception and diversion. The idea was to use Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's Northern Force, a group of carriers, many of them depleted of aircraft, as a tantalizing lure. These carriers were the bait, designed to draw the powerful American Third Fleet, under the aggressive command of Admiral William Bull Halsey, away from the vital landing sites at Leyte Gulf. With Halsey's massive fleet carriers and fast battleships removed from the equation, 2 other Japanese forces would then strike the now vulnerable American invasion fleet. From the south, Vice Admiral Shoji Nishimura's force would approach through the Surigao Strait. From the west, the truly formidable hammer would fall, Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force. This was the heart of the Japanese Navy's surface strength. Its centerpiece was the colossal battleship Yamato, the largest and most powerfully armed battleship ever constructed, a floating fortress whose 9 18.1-inch guns could hurl armor-piercing shells the weight of a small car over 20 miles. Accompanying Yamato were her sister ship Musashi, the battleships Nagato, Kongo, and Haruna, a powerful squadron of heavy and light cruisers like the Chokai, Haguro, and Tone, and over a dozen destroyers. This was a fleet built to obliterate anything in its path. The plan began to unfold. As Kurita's center force transited the Palawan Passage on October 23, it was ambushed by the American submarines Darter and Dace, which sank 2 heavy cruisers, including Kurita's own flagship, the Atago, forcing the admiral to swim for his life and transfer his command to the Yamato. The next day, as the force entered the Sibuyan Sea, it was subjected to a relentless onslaught from Admiral Halsey's carrier-based aircraft. In a series of massive airstrikes, the American pilots focused their fury on the mighty Musashi, pounding the behemoth with 17 bombs and 19 torpedoes until she succumbed to the waves, taking over 1,000 of her crew with her. Other ships in the center force were damaged, and the assault was so fierce that Kurita temporarily reversed course, giving the Americans the impression he was in full retreat. To the south, the other prong of the Japanese attack met a disastrous end. As Nishimura's force entered the Surigao Strait on the night of October 24, they sailed directly into a classic naval ambush. American PT boats harried them, destroyers launched devastating torpedo attacks, and finally, the battle line of the U.S. 7th Fleet, which included battleships raised from the mud of Pearl Harbor, crossed the Japanese T and annihilated Nishimura's squadron in a thunderous display of radar-directed gunfire. But the critical event, the one that would set the scene for the drama off Samar, was unfolding to the north. Admiral Halsey's scout planes had finally located Ozawa decoy carrier force. Seeing the opportunity to destroy the last remaining Japanese aircraft carriers, Halsey took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. In a fateful decision, he ordered his entire Third Fleet, all of his fast carriers and every one of his powerful new battleships, to race north and engage Ozawa. He left behind not a single battleship, not a single fleet carrier to guard the San Bernardino Strait. The back door through which Kurita's battered but still immensely powerful center force was now advancing, unseen and unexpected. The trap was set, but the trapper had left his post. The 130,000 American soldiers on the beaches of Leyte, and the small groups of escort carriers supporting them, were now terrifyingly exposed. And so, as the sun rose on October 25, Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita led his fleet of 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers out of the San Bernardino Strait and turned south toward Leyte Gulf. His mission was simple and devastating: crash into the American landing fleet and wreak havoc. Just after 6:30 in the morning, lookouts on the American ships of Taffy 3 spotted anti-aircraft fire and the distinct pagoda-like masts of Japanese warships on the northern horizon. At first, disbelief reigned. Surely these were friendly ships from Halsey's fleet. But that disbelief turned to cold dread when an Avenger torpedo bomber pilot, Ensign William C. Brooks, radioed back a chilling confirmation. "I can see pagoda masts. I see the biggest meatball flag on the biggest battleship I ever saw." He was looking at the Yamato. The might of Japan's navy was only 17 miles away, and it was closing fast. Aboard the flagship of Taffy 3, the escort carrier USS Fanshawe Bay, Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague faced a nightmare. His command, Task Unit April 3, 77, was a collection of ships utterly unsuited for a surface gunfight. His 6 escort carriers, nicknamed Jeep carriers, or baby flat-tops, were slow, converted merchant hulls with a top speed of only 18 knots. They were protected by thin armor and mounted a single 5-inch gun as a stern deterrent. Their screen consisted of 3 Fletcher-class destroyers, the Johnston, Hull, and Heermann, and 4 even smaller and slower destroyer escorts, the Samuel B. Roberts, Dennis, Raymond, and John C. Butler. These tin cans were nimble, but their 5-inch guns were like pea shooters against the armored sides of Japanese battleships and cruisers. Only their torpedoes posed a real threat, but using them would require a suicidal charge into the heart of the enemy fleet. Admiral Kurita, peering through his binoculars, made a crucial error. The low, blocky silhouettes of the escort carriers were unfamiliar. In the heat of the moment, he mistook them for the large fleet carriers of Halsey's Third Fleet. Believing he had stumbled upon a major component of the American fast carrier force, he ordered a general attack, signaling his ships to break formation and engage the enemy independently. This decision, born of a desire to press his advantage quickly, ironically threw his own force into a state of confusion. Ships began to jockey for position, cutting across each other's lines of fire, as they surged forward toward what they thought was a grand prize. For the Americans, there was no time for deliberation. Admiral Sprague immediately issued a series of commands that would define the battle. He turned his entire task unit east, into the wind, and ordered all carriers to launch every aircraft they had, every Wildcat fighter, every Avenger torpedo bomber, regardless of what they were armed with. Some planes took off with depth charges, others with small anti-personnel bombs, rockets, or even just their machine guns. They were sent into the fray with orders to attack, and then, if they could, to land at the American airfield on Leyte. As the carriers fled, Sprague ordered his destroyers and destroyer escorts to lay down a massive, choking smokescreen to hide the retreating flat-tops. And then, he gave the order that would require a level of courage almost beyond comprehension. He sent his tiny screen of ships on a torpedo attack against the entire Japanese fleet. The first to answer the call was the USS Johnston, a Fletcher-class destroyer commanded by Commander Ernest E. Evans, a Native American officer of Cherokee and Creek descent who had famously told his crew at the ship's commissioning, "This is going to be a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way, and anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off right now." True to his word, without waiting for a direct order, Evans ordered the Johnston to flank speed and turned his ship directly toward the advancing Japanese Leviathans. It was a David and Goliath charge of the most profound proportions. The Johnston, a 2,100-ton destroyer, began dueling with the 70,000-ton Yamato. As she charged, her gunnery officer, Lieutenant Robert Hagen, began firing her 5-inch guns at the closest heavy cruisers, scoring hits that sparked fires on their superstructures. Japanese shells, some from the massive main batteries of the battleships, began to land around the little destroyer, throwing up towering geysers of water dyed bright pink, yellow, green, and red from the color-coded shells of the different Japanese ships. The spectacle was so surreal that one sailor on the carrier White Plains was heard to quip, "They're shooting at us in Technicolor." The Johnston pressed on through this storm of steel, weaving and dodging, her crew chasing the splashes of incoming shells to throw off the enemy's aim. She closed to within 10,000 yards of the heavy cruiser Kumano, swung broadside, and unleashed a full spread of 10 torpedoes. One of these found its mark, smashing into the Kumano's bow and blowing it clean off. The cruiser, flagship of a destroyer squadron, was forced to withdraw, crippled. As the Johnston turned to retreat, she was finally caught by the Japanese counterfire. A salvo of massive 18.1-inch shells from the Yamato tore into her, followed by a barrage of smaller caliber fire. The ship was ravaged. Her speed was cut, her engine room was flooded, her bridge was shattered, and Commander Evans lost 2 fingers on his left hand and suffered terrible shrapnel wounds. Yet, the Johnston survived, limping away to conduct emergency repairs, her crew fighting fires and shoring up bulkheads amidst the dead and dying. The Johnston's heroic charge was only the beginning. The destroyer USS Hull, leading the screen, was ordered to attack and immediately became the focus of the Japanese fleet's wrath. She charged toward the battleship Congo, but was intercepted by the heavy cruiser Haguro. 8-inch shells slammed into the hull, destroying her fire control radar, knocking out one of her engines and starting fierce fires. Despite this punishment, the Whole pressed on, launching a spread of torpedoes at the Congo that forced the battleship to turn away. Then, turning her attention to the Japanese battleship line, the Whole, now a floating wreck, launched her remaining torpedoes at the Yamato and Nagato. This audacious attack forced the Japanese giants, including Kurita's flagship, to turn away sharply, taking them out of the battle for a critical 20 minutes and disrupting the entire Japanese formation. The Whole, having drawn the ire of the entire enemy fleet, was then systematically torn apart. She was hit by over 40 shells of various calibers. With her engines dead, her guns silent, and fires raging out of control, the order to abandon ship was given. The Whole rolled over and sank, taking 253 of her crew with her. Not to be outdone, the destroyer escort USS Samuel B. Roberts joined the fray. These ships were even smaller, slower, and more lightly armed than the destroyers, never intended for surface combat. But the Roberts's commander, Lieutenant Commander Robert W. Copeland, knew what was required. By diverting all steam to her engines, his crew pushed the little ship to an astonishing 28 knots. The Roberts charged into the fight, engaging the heavy cruiser Chikuma in a point-blank gun duel. Her 5-inch shells, though small, rained down on the Japanese cruiser's superstructure, starting fires and causing significant damage. She closed to within suicidal range and fired her 3 torpedoes. Her crew believed they scored a hit, though Japanese records are unclear. The Roberts then used her remaining ammunition, first high explosive, then armor-piercing, then even star shells, to continue the fight, firing so fast her guns glowed red-hot. She and the destroyer Hirman pummeled the Chikuma with an estimated 205-inch shells. But the Roberts's luck could not hold. She was caught by the battleship Congo and hit by multiple 14-inch shells. Powerless and sinking, the Roberts was abandoned, going down by the stern with the loss of 90 men. While the small ships waged their desperate battle, the escort carriers were running for their lives. They fled into rain squalls, their pilots performing acts of incredible bravery. With no proper anti-ship weapons, the American aviators made dry run after dry run, strafing Japanese bridges and gun positions, dropping depth charges, and doing anything they could to distract and harass the enemy. The air was filled with the roar of aircraft engines, the thunder of massive guns, and the constant, terrifying splash of near misses. The carrier USS Gambier Bay, lagging behind the others, was caught by the Japanese battleships. Shells from the Yamato and others tore into her, ripping through her thin hull, destroying her engines, and leaving her dead in the water. She was abandoned and capsized, a terrible loss. The carriers Kalinin Bay and Fanshawe Bay were also hit multiple times by cruiser fire. Their flight decks holed and fires started, but their crews' heroic damage control efforts kept them afloat and fighting. The cumulative effect of this ferocious, unrelenting defense began to take its toll on Admiral Kurita. His fleet, designed for a coordinated attack, was now scattered across the ocean. The aggressive torpedo attacks by the American destroyers had disrupted his formation. The constant, buzzing attacks from the American aircraft, which seemed to come from a never-ending supply, convinced him he was indeed engaging the main carrier force of the Third Fleet. He had no idea that Halsey was hundreds of miles to the north. The smoke, the rain squalls, and the sheer chaos of the battle made it impossible for him to get a clear picture. He knew he had sunk some carriers, but he was losing cruisers at an alarming rate. The Chokai had been crippled by a combination of gunfire from a carrier and a bomb hit that detonated her torpedoes. The Chikuma was immobilized by a torpedo from an Avenger and later finished off by air attack. The Suzuya, damaged earlier, was also sunk by aircraft. His destroyers were low on fuel. The element of surprise was gone, and he believed the main American fleet would soon arrive to finish him off. At 9:20 a.m., after 2.5 hours of the most intense close-quarters combat, Kurita made the momentous decision. He broke off the engagement. Signaling, "All ships, my course north, speed 20, he ordered his mighty fleet to withdraw, leaving behind a stunned and battered, but victorious, Taffy 3. The American sailors, who had been fighting with the certainty of their own destruction, watched in disbelief as the Japanese ships turned away. The battle was not completely over. A force of Japanese land-based kamikaze aircraft arrived later, sinking the escort carrier USS St. Lo and damaging others. But the main surface threat had vanished. The cost of this miracle had been immense. Taffy 3 lost 2 escort carriers, the Gambier Bay and St. Lo, 2 destroyers, the Johnston and Hull, and 1 destroyer escort, the Samuel B. Roberts. Over 1,000 American sailors and aviators lost their lives, a death toll comparable to the American losses at the Coral Sea and Midway combined. The Japanese lost 3 heavy cruisers and suffered heavy damage to their fleet, with nearly 3,000 casualties. But they had been turned back. The Leyte beachhead was saved. In the aftermath, the battle became a source of both immense pride and fierce controversy. Admiral Halsey was heavily criticized for taking his entire fleet north and leaving the San Bernardino Strait unguarded, a decision that nearly led to catastrophe. The men of Taffy 3, however, were hailed as heroes. Their unit received the Presidential Unit Citation for extraordinary heroism in action. Commander Ernest Evans of the Johnston was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, the first Native American in the Navy to receive the honor. Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz later wrote that the success of Taffy 3 was nothing short of special dispensation from the Lord Almighty. But it was more than that. It was the result of raw courage, tenacious skill, and the unwavering determination of every man, from the admiral on the bridge to the cook manning a battle station, to do their duty against impossible odds. The battle off Samar stands as an eternal testament to the fact that in war, the human spirit can sometimes overcome even the most overwhelming material disadvantage, a story of valor that would echo through history as one of the greatest last stands ever fought upon the sea.